Hello there. This is going to be a video that is going to be a bit different from the previous ones that I have done in terms of recommending books. Because what I have done in this season, when we're talking about books, and I have recommended you some books, I have made lists for you in literature, in politics, in some topics. And I have told you, read this one because of this reason, read that one because of that reason. And there was a list of 5 books, in case of the Italian literature, 4 books. But today's video is going to be a little different. I'm still going to recommend you books, but as the video goes on, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Today, I want to recommend you books on philosophy, and I think it's crucial, above all and more than ever, in the times we are living in. You should be reading philosophy. You should be trying to search for those that remained in history as classics, as all-time must-reads, because what they have said or how they have said it influenced generations, history, big decisions, and so on. A classic doesn't become a classic out of nowhere. Above all, the ones until the beginning of the 19th century. They became classics because they told very important things, universal things, generic things, things that can invite you to think, that can provoke you to think in whichever era you're living, at least for now. Who knows what kind of world we're going to have in the future, but until today's time, today's age, the classics are absolutely fruitful. They are endless source of knowledge, information, um, methods to think. They teach you how to think, and I would like to go on that path, so to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend you how not to start studying philosophy. So today we're going to work on the negative, what you should not read to start philosophy. It's not that I'm necessarily going to make a list, 5 books you should not read to start philosophy, but I'm going to tell you a little bit how you should not go, and of course at the end I'm going to tell you how I think you should go. And what I think you should avoid doing is, I think you should avoid going to fashion philosophers, to philosophers that are extremely popular, above all among young people, philosophers that are being cited and quoted all the time on the internet, and modern philosophers. What do I mean by modern philosophers? The closest to ones, the ones that are closer to our times. And the closer they get to our times, the most difficult it would be for you. I have watched many videos in which people recommend those who want to start on philosophy to read Nietzsche, Schopenhauer. Sometimes I've seen people even recommending like Kant, Heidegger, Hegel, and so on. And I couldn't disagree more with that. And I'm going to tell you why. These people, they are crucial for the history of philosophy. They are very, very important philosophers that at a certain point you should read. But the thing is, different from other areas of knowledge, in philosophy, the greatest ones are always talking to the previous ones. They are always talking to the past, either to disagree, or to agree, or to reinforce, or to diverge, or to completely put themselves in opposition, or to renew. They are always in a dialogue with the ones that came before them and that allowed them to be where they are. If you read a specific philosopher, let's say for example Nietzsche, because Nietzsche is so fashion popular and so on, people want to read him. If you read a philosopher like Nietzsche, the highest chances are that no matter how many times you read the books, you are not going to understand what he's really talking about. And it's not because you are incapable, it's not because you are whatever ignorant or anything like that. The problem is When you are going to read a philosopher, you need to understand where this philosopher is coming from, who he's talking to, what is the vocabulary this philosopher is using. The word, I don't know, truth for Nietzsche means something totally different than the word truth for Plato. The word dialectics for Kant means something totally different than what the word dialectics means to Socrates. Now imagine you, without previous or substantial philosophical knowledge, going to one of these philosophers, starting to read them and using your preconceived ideas or the common sense ideas of your time or your own beliefs to read those philosophers and interpret them. You are going to be way far from understanding what they are really saying. You are going to understand them according to your actual values, to the way certain words are represented to you, to the way you understand certain things, and you are not going to be able to put yourself in those times, in those political, historical, social circumstances, in understanding who they are dialoguing with, who they are opposing themselves to, who are they trying to refute, who are they trying to confirm or reinforce. So when it comes to philosophy, the easiest way for you is to start from the beginning. I know there will be those who are specialists and PhD philosophers who are going to say, no way, if you read the Greeks or even before the pre-Socratics, the philosophers that came before Socrates, you are not going to understand anything. Their language sometimes is obscure, filled with metaphors and blah, 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 and so on. What I can tell you is, if that is going to be difficult, reading Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Kant, Hegel, Heidegger, Sartre, Bachelard, without having read the Greeks before, without having read the people that came before them and with whom they are directly talking, you are really not going to understand. It's going to be even more challenging. It's going to be even more difficult. It is not like reading the newspaper. You do not read philosophy just putting together the words and getting information. Philosophy is a long, full of effort and arduous work of interpretation, of understanding, of slowly getting to know what is being talked about, of slowly getting to understand what the philosopher is referring to, who he's talking with, what is supposed to be discussed in that specific book, in that specific paragraph that you are reading. It is not just like I'm going to read these sentences as if they were, I don't know, telling me a story, or as if I was getting information about the news. Oh, today another koala bear was born or whatever. You know, it doesn't work like that in philosophy. It's a very specific field. It's a theoretical field. It's a field that invites you to much more than read. Reread, interpret what you are reading, read between the lines, understand the reasons and the motivations why those people are writing, saying the way they are writing, the way they are saying. So my suggestion for you, if you want to start with philosophy, is start with the Greeks and start as early as possible in terms of history. If you can start with the pre-Socratics and then Plato and then Aristotle and then go on in this historical ladder, so to say, I think you are going to have a less difficult and a less complicated life to understand what's going on. Because when you read Aristotle, he's going to be referring all the time to Plato. And if you have no idea of what Plato said, you cannot know whether Aristotle is saying something correct, accurate, consistent, coherent, if his interpretation of Plato is good or not, and ultimately if what he is saying makes sense or not. And the same thing with every single philosopher that comes after them. You are never going to be able to understand Hegel if you haven't read Kant before. Hegel is constantly denying Kant. I could even say that the Phenomenology of the Spirit is a book in which every sentence is denying the critique of pure reason of Kant. So if you haven't read Kant, you're not going to understand Hegel. Ultimately, my suggestion, as I'm saying, is start from the beginning. Study philosophy, at least in the beginning of your journey in philosophy, in a historical manner, in a historical perspective. After a long while, and I'm really talking about a long while, years and years studying that, you are going to be able to navigate freely. You are going to be able to say, now I want to read this, now I want to read that, because you are going to have understood the basics, so to say, of the history of philosophy. Every philosopher is somehow, whether he wants it or not, whether you want it or not, historian, someone who is dedicated to the history of philosophy. If you want to start that path, you are going to have to somehow become a historian. You are going to have to somehow understand the history of philosophy. It's a beautiful history. It's a history full of emotions, full of ideas, full of creativity, full of things that changed our story, our history, the way we are, the way we live, the way we interact with each other. And I totally encourage you to start on that path. But try to start the less complicated way, because it is already a complicated way. And I'm trying to suggest you the least complicated one so that you stick to it and that you profit from it. See you in the next episode.